Well, guys, it is great to be with you. Looking forward to sharing these next few sessions with you all. This being discipleship and leadership, I wanted to share a little bit of my heart with you in how this came about. I've served Alabama churches for about 20 years, and it has been from the small church that I grew up in Walker County through coming into First Baptist Decatur just here recently. And over the years, I've served in student ministry and education, discipleship ministry, and I found myself getting frustrated with student ministry because it's always like, go, go, go all the time, a lot of activities, a lot of stuff going on. And I just remember thinking through, all right, if we do one more lock-in, why? What is the purpose? And by the way, y'all know lock-ins are of the devil, right? There's nothing good that can possibly come from a lock-in. A lot of comments can be made about that, but why are we doing what we're doing? And so it wasn't until like my third church that the Lord began dealing with me. I was at First Baptist Selma, and I came across where Jesus is talking with the Pharisees in Matthew chapter 23. And he starts calling them some very kind words, right? Like, you blind guides, you fools, you hypocrites. He said that you guys you're pretty on the outside. You're like a whitewashed tomb on the outside, but on the inside, you're full of death and decay. He said, you will strain a gnat from your drinking water, but yet you swallow a camel. Because they literally would. And the gnat is the smallest creature that could make them unclean. So they would literally strain their drinking water. But they were missing the big picture. And Jesus said, you guys, you're swallowing a camel. And then he said something that really got my attention, as if that didn't already get my attention. But he said, you will cross land and sea to make a convert. And when you do, you make them twice the sons of hell that you are. So that tells us that the Pharisees were making converts. They were making duplicates of themselves. But Jesus said that when they did that, they were making those people twice the sons of hell that the Pharisees were. So here's the scary part for me. At the time, I was early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, trying to figure out this ministry thing, What scared me was that the Pharisees thought they were right. They were professional religious leaders. And that's where I found myself. And so they come face to face with Jesus himself, and he says, you guys are completely missing the mark on this. And that scared me. And so I just simply asked the Lord, all right, Jesus, if you were to come into this building and we had a cup of coffee and we're just talking through, where would you bust me the way you busted the Pharisees? And y'all, I'm just going to tell you, there were two things, but the one thing that we're going to focus on through these sessions is I am convinced wholeheartedly one of the areas where Jesus would say that we as a church, where we're missing the mark, is that we have been great at developing programs, but we struggle at discipling people. And that in itself was life-changing for me because it changed my ministry, it changed the focus. And so from that point on, I wanted to structure everything we did for student ministry and education ministry to make disciples. And so when that happened, it kind of freed me up because when you have a good foundation of the entire purpose of your ministry, then it changes everything because it then takes every periphery thing that comes up and you can say yes to some things and say no to other things. So what is the focus of your ministry when it comes to discipleship, when it comes to discipling? Because please understand, what we're going to do in this first session is, in the first couple of sessions, we're going to talk about language. We're going to set a foundation from the very beginning, set up a foundation of common language. Because as you know, language creates culture. And within that language, the way you define terms sets a standard. It sets your goal. So we have to define, so what is discipleship? What is the purpose of your ministry? And so I would just challenge all of us to kind of rethink what truly is discipleship. What have we been called scripturally? What have we been called to do? Because if you think that discipleship is a 10-week class, if you think discipleship is something that happens for an hour at 5 o'clock on Sunday night and that's it, then I think you're missing the mark. And that's where I was. And so you come across passages like 1 Thessalonians 2:8, where Paul beautifully explains to the church at Thessalonica, guys, we loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our lives as well. And so there is this notion in Scripture time and time again, because you see the relationships that Paul developed and that Jesus developed. You see this idea of that discipling people isn't just about someone standing behind a lectern or table and just regurgitating information, but it is living life together and actually experiencing the things that we find in Scripture. And that's the good stuff, that's the bad stuff, that's everything. And actually walking together to do these things and how we flesh out these things. So, language creates culture. And so the first question I want us to address right now is, what is the purpose of ministry? And I know that sounds so simple, but I guarantee you that if you have 5 people in a room that are from 5 different parts of the state or country or wherever, and you ask, what's the purpose of ministry, you're going to get probably 3 or 4 or 5 different answers. So I asked this question one time, and I had a guy say, purpose of ministry is get them saved. All right? So he's pretty excited, right? Get them saved. That's the purpose of ministry. And can I just tell you that getting people saved is certainly part of what we're called to do. Lead people to Christ through the gospel. But y'all, if that's the goal of ministry, then when we see them come to Christ, you know what's going to happen? Then we're going to leave them, and they're going to go out the back door. And our churches will continue to be weak. And so if salvation, if we think salvation is the end goal of our ministry, then we are missing the mark. And so, from Matthew 28, from the Great Commission, and we're going to talk about that a few times over the course of these sessions, I would like for us to come to the agreement that what Jesus said as his final command and commission to the disciples and to us as well is to, as you're living your life and as you're going, that you are making disciples and that you are teaching, you're baptizing, and you are helping people grow in the things that Jesus has taught us. So, if we say that the purpose of ministry is to make disciples, then there's that old debate about, okay, so is it evangelism, is it discipleship? And the answer to that question is yes. Because if the goal of your ministry is to make disciples, then you have to share Christ with the lost people, right? So there's evangelism. But once they give their life to Christ and they become that spiritual infant, well, what do you do with them then? You walk with them and you begin doing what Jesus said to do in teaching them everything that He commanded us to do. So the purpose of ministry then, for the sake of this conversation, for the sake of our time together, then we're going to say that the purpose of ministry is to make disciples. And in the next session, we're going to talk about, all right, so what is a healthy disciple? Because that's then going to set up for us our goal. That's going to set up our target. Because if with your people, if the people that are in your ministry, if they don't all agree, if you don't help them catch the vision, then for one common vision of what's the purpose of this ministry, then you have one group in the church who's going to think that the purpose of their ministry is way off in left field. Or you've got another one that's way over here in this other right field, whatever. To help your people know what the common goal is, biblically speaking, will help bring everybody to the same point in the same way, to help them understand the goal of our ministry here as we serve together is to make disciples. And so, when things come up, when things are brought to the table, can we start this? Can we do this? Can we have another lock-in? Or whatever it is, you can say yes or no based on the biblical mandate. Is that project, is that event, is that ministry going to help us make disciples, to reach the lost people that are around us and grow them, introduce them to Christ, and then take them into this spiritual process of growing and being sanctified? So we're going to continue. The next session, we'll talk about what is a healthy disciple.